Here with Flawless Magic, continuing our series on the hypergeometric distribution. This time I'm going to show you how to figure out how many lands of each color you should run to accommodate the number of mana symbols that you have on creatures and other spells. So the first thing you need to do is figure out your mana cost. So let's say you look at all your cards and you write down all of the most expensive costs. So let's say you have a 1-drop that just costs B, but then you have a 2-drop that costs 2 green, like Colonian Tusker, and then you've got another, we'll say 1 BB, 1 GG, and then we'll even say you've got like 2 GG. So these are all of your creatures. We'll say you don't run anything above a 4-drop. So the first thing you need to look at is, okay, 4-drop, well, I want 4 times 60 divided by 10, right? Because turn 4 you will have drawn 6 cards. And this is to solve for how many land you should run. We're at 24. I really don't know why everything in here is set to a percentage. We're at 24. So we're off to a good start. On average, we'll open up with 24. With 24 land, we'll hit our 4th land drop on turn 4. So now, basically I'm going to use the same formula the way I just did, solving for how many land we need to run of each color. So here, I need 1 black out of a 60 card deck, and I want it on turn 1. We'll say it's something I actually want to play on turn 1. If it's like an instant and you're okay with not casting it on turn 1, or an enchantment and you couldn't because you don't have a creature to target it with, then that's a completely different situation, and you should take that into consideration. But we'll say it's a 1-drop black creature. I'm struggling to think of one right now, but 1-drop black creature, some kind of rat or something, and divided by number of cards drawn, which is 7. So we need at least 8.5. So you would generally round up and say 9 minimum to hit that on average. Same thing here. We want 2 mana symbols of green divided by 60. Now we've drawn 8 cards, so we're at 15 symbols of green. We want 2 symbols of black out of a 60 card deck. Now we've drawn 9 cards total, so rounding up, that's 14. This, since we don't need 2 green until turn 3, is going to be less strict of a cost as needing those same 2 green by turn 2. So we don't even need to consider this, and we don't need to consider this. And basically, these are our most expensive cards in the deck from each color. So what I like to do is then figure out how many we're going to run. So obviously, it's saying we need 29 total symbols to, on average, be able to play all of our stuff. Well, we're only running 24 cards, so how's that going to work? It's going to work because we're going to play some dual lands. It's really not possible to run a deck with this expensive cost of having multiple mana symbols in the 2 and 3 drop slots of more than one color without having some kind of dual land, unless you just don't plan on casting those cards on the turn that you could at earliest cast them. So first thing we could do is say, okay, well, we want 15 and 14, and we'll set this up to go ahead and add for us. Right now we need 29 full symbols. Let's add 4 dual lands, doesn't matter what they are, and then we'll drop 2 of each of these. So now our symbols are the same. What am I doing wrong? So the dual lands add 1 of each color, so I should actually drop 4 from each of them. Okay, so now we're at 25 cards. We're still hitting, let me make sure, green, black, adding up all the green, adding up all the black. Okay, I have these switched, so let's do that. So now we have the symbols, we're down to 25 land, we have everything we need here, but it's not good enough, really. One thing we could do is just add in one more and then take out one more somewhere from each of them. And so we still have the minimum that we need to be able to hit everything. Now, one thing I would recommend against, especially when it comes to land, is settling for the minimum. Just because you have 15 symbols, and on average you're going to hit, the number of green symbols you need by turn 2. One thing you have to realize with the mean form of the hypergeometric distribution is that average turns out to be roughly 63% of the time. So that means, the other 36% of the time you're not going to hit it. And that's usually not good enough for most people. So what I would recommend is actually bump this up by a little bit more. And if you can, you're in a format that has multiple dual lands, which probably you have to be in order to play something this expensive, then you can bump it up. So we'll add 3 more here, and then I can drop this, trying to see what I need to do. I'll just do it stepwise, because I don't feel like... Okay, so now by doing this, we're... let's do it one more. Ba-na-na-na-na. Okay, so now by doing this, we have 2 more mana symbols of each color than we need. We're still at 24 land, and we've got dual lands in here. If you're playing a format that has fetch lands, they count because they can fetch either one. If you're playing a format that has shock lands, that's a great way to be able to play them and not have to worry about it coming into play taps. One thing that I want to tell you is that depending on when you need it, it's not always the worst thing to have lands that enter tapped. Now obviously here you need 2 green by turn 2. So what I would recommend for something like that is maybe, if you can, get lands that can enter untapped. Even if there aren't multiple dual lands, you can always resort to something like Evolving Wilds that'll just search out basic lands. But one thing I would recommend here is maybe add in some form of mana ramp, since green is your requirement. If you go, if turn 1 you only have a forest as your green symbol, but you can play it for some kind of elf, elvish mystic, whatever, 1-drop mana ramp elf they have that produces green mana in your format, I would consider playing that just because this is such a high requirement. You're still more than likely to hit it, but the problem is if you're dealing with lands that come in tapped, what if you draw 2 of them your opening hand? Then turn 1 you're not going to be able to do anything. Turn 2 at best you might be able to play a 1-drop creature, but you won't be able to play this guy on turn 2 like you ideally would. Colonian Tusker turn 2, great. Colonian Tusker turn 3 or 4, not as impactful. So I hope this has been helpful in showing you how to figure out, how many of each color to run. This is the way I do it if I'm doing it quickly on the fly. I'll show you later on, way down the road, how I do it to be more accurate if I have time in developing a constructed deck. But this is a method that you arguably could do on scratch paper at F&M while you're building a limited deck. So next video I'll show you how to figure out how many creatures to run of each cost.